And now on the line is Steve Bradley from Rail Lobby Group Into the West. Steve, welcome back to Near FM.
Hi Darren, how are you keeping?
Good, thanks, Steve. Steve, today is only my second interview with you. I last spoke to you on Near FM just over a year ago. I know that you and Into the West have some big news. But first of all, could you remind our listeners today, for those who don't know, about who Into the West are, Steve, and the reasons why you were set up in the first place?
Yes, so Into the West, we are the rail campaign for the northwest corner of the island. So that's counties Derry, Donegal, Tyrone and Fermanagh. I'm sure some of your listeners will be aware of the map of rail on the island, which goes around social media all the time. And there's a massive hole in the top left-hand corner in the northwest. There's 5 counties in Ireland that don't have rail, and they're all in the northwest or in the border region: Tyrone, Fermanagh, Cavan and Monaghan. So our patch covers 2 of those counties, Donegal and Tyrone, and what we're looking to do is where there is existing rail in the northwest, because there's a small stretch between Derry and Coleraine, we're seeking to get that improved, but we're also looking to get rail restored across the rest of the region by reopening some of the former railway lines which used to exist. And we've just launched a campaign which is about reopening the northwest rail corridor, which I'll come on to in a minute. But you asked there, Darren, why were we set up? We began in 2004. Some of your listeners on Near FM will be familiar with the name Eamon McCann. Eamon's a very long-standing civil rights activist and a very well-known Derry man and media commentator, etc. In 2004, Stormont was down, as it is at the moment. It wasn't running, and the civil servants in Northern Ireland proposed shutting Derry's railway line. They were going to shut the railway line west of Ballymena. So for your listeners, in case they don't know where that is, Ballymena is basically 30 miles outside Belfast. It's bang in the middle of Antrim. If they'd shut the railway line west of there, it would have stripped the last bit of rail out of the entire west of Ulster and really left Derry isolated. Derry is the 4th biggest city on the island, and it's a regional capital, and it would really have been another hammer blow, because Derry, up until the 60s, was at the centre of a vibrant rail network with 4 lines, 4 stations in the city. It's only got 1 line left and 1 station, and in 2004 it was proposed to get rid of that. So that's why we were set up, to oppose that, which we successfully did. And since then we've had other successes in terms of getting investment in the line and getting a new station for Derry. And in recent years, our focus has gone upon expanding rail right across the northwest corner, including counties Tyrone, Donegal and Fermanagh. And that's where we've come to today in terms of launching our Northwest Rail Corridor campaign.
Yeah, I know it's not probably politically correct to say this in the Republic of Ireland, I know anyway, but we had on the island of Ireland a very good, I believe, transport network decades ago. I just find it unforgivable that Irish and British governments, or the Stormont executive decades ago, closed so many of the lines. I understand that a lot of them probably weren't profitable, or most of them weren't. That's the reason they were closed. But it's kind of like, to get rid of that infrastructure, it just seems to me to be unforgivable. Okay, I believe that Eamon Ryan, the Minister for Transport in the Republic of Ireland, is working with the Northern Ireland Department for Infrastructure in Northern Ireland on the question of all-island rail access. Can you tell our listeners more about this, Steve?
Yeah, that was an initiative that was launched, from memory, it was last year, as a north-south thing done jointly between Nicola Mallon, when she was the Minister in the north, and Eamon Ryan in the south. And it was a sensible proposal, because there's changes that are needed to rail provision both north and south of the border, and there's no point doing them separately. Ireland's a small island. Regardless of your politics, it makes sense to coordinate things like transport infrastructure, especially on rail, where there's already 1 existing cross-border line, and ideally we'll have some more in the future. So that process began last year. At the very start of this year, it went to public consultation. And I'm really pleased to say that of all the consultations which went in, and I think there were 6,000 across the island, the two greatest number of contributions were from Fermanagh, Omagh, and from Derry Strabane area, which is, both of them are on our patch and both of them are in the northwest. So we're really pleased that it just shows that people in the northwest, when given the opportunity, were very quick to input into officialdom and say, look, we need better rail, we need more rail, we need rail returned in this area. So where things have got to on that, our understanding is that the report was pretty much close to being finished, and it was due to be published before the end of this year. But the fly in the ointment now is that there's no minister in the north anymore. We're in a kind of a sort of a weird hiatus in the north, trying to find out if there's going to be an election called in December or not. And it needs the minister in the north to sign off that document before it can be published, because obviously it's a north and south initiative. So that means we probably won't get to see what's in that document until the new year. In terms of what it will say about our patch, we don't know. We're hopeful. Nicola Mallon, who was the previous transport minister, used to repeatedly focus upon the northwest in terms of saying, what needed to be looked at in terms of rails. So we're hopeful there'll be something in there. But what we're trying to do with the campaign, which we've just launched this week, is we're saying, look, this railway line, which runs from Letterkenny through Derry, Strabane, Omagh, Dungannon to Portadown, and from there up to Belfast or down to Dublin, we're saying that should be the number one cross-border rail opening priority on the island. It should be getting cross-border funding. And regardless of what it says in the All-Ireland Rail Review, hopefully that report will agree with us, in which case, great, we'll have developed a head of steam in the public behind reopening it. But if, God forbid, the report should say that it doesn't agree with us, then, tough. We'll have had we'll have a petition, and we'll have a whole load of people in the public who say, no, think again, this is a really important opening. So we're getting our punch in early, if you like, in terms of what's going to be in that report. But as I said, chances are it'll probably come out at some point in the new year at this stage.
Okay, to read from your press release I got from you yesterday, to quote you, you say, no other initiative would have as profound an impact upon Donegal as restoring its rail access would, and no other rail project on the island would connect such a large number of people across so many significant towns and counties. That's why the North West Rail Corridor should be the top priority rail reopening for governments north and south, and the number one focus for cross-border funding. Steve, I know that Taoiseach Micheál Martin has spearheaded the Shared Island initiative by the Government of Ireland over the last 2 or 3 years. Can you remind our listeners as well, Steve, for those who don't know, about what the Shared Island initiative by the Irish Government is, and then could you tell us whether you think it is likely that your area is going to or will get funding from the unit?
Yeah, it's a good question, Darren. So so there's a unit being set up within government, which is about looking at cross-border projects and providing funding north and south for projects, because obviously some of them, there's various projects which straddle the border, and the only way sensibly they can work and progress is if both sides put some funding into that. So that's why the Shared Island unit was set up, and there's funding available. In terms of the types of projects it's been funding so far, there's some really good projects, but I would argue that they're of limited geographical scope. So, for example, one is the Ulster Canal, which covers, Fermanagh and into the Republic down there. It'll be a great project when that canal is improved and opened up more. It'll be a great leisure route. But again, it just covers, just a couple of counties and a small area on the border. Another project is the Narrowwater Bridge, which is linking down over to Louth, basically crossing Carlingford. And again, great for that area. It'll certainly improve road journeys there. But it's a relatively limited project, again, in terms of scope. If you look at the North West Rail Corridor, our proposal will cover 4 different counties, 1 in the south, 3 in the north. But then obviously it'll link on to Dublin afterwards. It'll cross through towns which have a combined population of about 250,000 people. It'll add some of the biggest towns in Northern Ireland that currently don't have rail onto the Irish rail network. And importantly, it'll return Donegal and Tyrone to rail for the first time in 60-odd years. So we would argue that, of all, if there's a Shared Island unit, if there's money available for cross-border projects, we would say, this should be a prime contender for that funding, and we'll make that case. Hopefully it'll get listened to. There'll be lots of stages for funding to happen. The first thing is a solid feasibility study to be done into this project to start getting the wheels moving, and we'll certainly be pushing for Shared Island funding for that. But yeah, we would make the argument that, if anything is worthy of cross-border funding, it is certainly a major project like this, which connects so many counties and so many people into both Dublin and Belfast, which are the economic and tourism hubs on the island.
I'd like to think that there'll be money available from the Stormont executive if it's sitting at that time, and maybe the British government. But is there enough money in the Shared Island initiative, do you think, to cover it, Steve?
I don't think. I mean, there wouldn't be enough to deliver the whole corridor. Big infrastructure costs big money. That shouldn't be a surprise to your listeners, and there's no way around that. Whether it be road, rail, airport, or whatever, all that stuff costs money. What the Shared Island Fund could definitely do is enable the first couple of stages, which would be like a really detailed feasibility study, including looking at specifics of routes. If this line was reopened, where should it run? How would it, for example, where would it be based in Letterkenny? How would you get it as close to the town centre as possible? The same with Omagh and the other places on the route. You look at the topography and decide where would be the best place to run a railway line, and all that really heavy lifting, so that after that it's very clear what the economic benefits would be of it all, but also how much it would cost, because you'd know where you would run the line, what the challenges would be on that, and how much it would cost. So I suspect Shared Islands funding could get all that work done and get it to a stage where it would then go to the ministers north and south and say, okay, do you want this to happen? If so, you need to start committing the money to actually get it built. So I suspect the Shared Islands unit wouldn't build it, although it could help build the Derry Letterkenny section, for example, because only a few miles of that would be in the north, the rest would be in the south. And importantly, the good thing about the site still being in the EU is that you could get EU structural funds for something like this. The northern and western region in the Republic was downgraded by the EU 2 years ago and is now considered to be a less developed region in transition. So there'll be EU funding for this, and obviously you would expect the government in the south to contribute, because not just the fact that part of it is in Donegal, but the only way you're ever going to connect Letterkenny to Dublin by rail is to come through the north. So hopefully the Republic's government would be open-minded to making a contribution to the rest of the route in the north as well, because it's completely in the interest of the government in the south to have that line running up through Tyrone and Derry to get people between Dublin and Donegal. So yeah, hopeful that that fund could certainly do some of the heavy financial lifting, but it wouldn't be able to deliver it all.
Do you have cross-party support in Northern Ireland, Steve?
Yeah, so it's been very interesting on Rail, Darren. What's happened is, as I mentioned earlier, Eamon McCann and the rest of the team on Into the West have been at this for nearly 20 years. I've only got involved in the last 4 or 5 years. Back when they were first doing this, people weren't interested in rail. I'll be honest with you. A lot of people would look at them and think, who cares about rail? That's old-fashioned and everything else. Something has changed in the last 5 years, and I suspect it's because of lots of small dynamics happening at the same time. We've got the whole climate crisis and the environment, so people get that we need sustainable forms of transport. There's been a big sort of resurgence, if you like, in the northwest corner of the island, certainly in the north, and it's sensed a bit in Donegal as well, that the way things have been up to now is no longer acceptable in terms of the lack of regional balance. And, you also have the fact that Dublin is overheating in terms of its property prices and it's, how crowded it is and everything else. And if you're serious about trying to balance the south economically and also in terms of population, you have to provide good transport so that people can live in places like Letterkenny and access jobs and tourism and everything else the same as people can in the rest of the island. So something's changed in the last 5 years, and what we found is political parties who we would have met 5 years ago, and they would have literally said to us, "Oh, sure, my voters don't use rail." Now they're kind of falling over themselves to get involved in rail initiatives, and who can be the first to talk positively about certain rail things happening. For example, Derry City are in the FAI Cup final in 2 weeks' time in Dublin, and a number of politicians were keen to tell everybody that they helped get a special train down to that, and that's positive, because it shows that the politicians are listening to the public, are picking up that they want rail to be improved, and are getting on board with that message. So it's really positive. They support, I won't name them, but some parties lean forward more on all of this than others. But yes, there's no party here who is opposed to better rail and to more rail in the north. Where it really come down to, the proof being in the pudding, is will they sign on the line? Will they commit funding to this? So we await with sort of bated breath to see who the next infrastructure minister will be in the north, because they're going to be absolutely in the box seat to deliver this sort of stuff. If it's somebody who buys into rail and wants it to happen, like the last 2 ministers have been, then we'll be in a good position. If it's somebody whose priorities are roads, or who just isn't interested in places like Tyrone or Donegal, then we may have more of a challenge. But yeah, it's good to have the political parties certainly nodding along with us up to now. but we need them to go further, and we need them to actually commit now.
Okay, and you have 3 public meetings next week, don't you? Can you tell me more about them, Steve?
Yeah, so we're doing a bit of a roadshow around the major towns on the reopened route. There's 3 next week and then 2 the week after. So next week on Monday, we've got a meeting in Derry. And Tuesday, we've got a meeting in the Station House Hotel in Letterkenny, and that's at 7 p.m. Wednesday, we're in Omagh. Then the following Monday, we're in Dungannon. And then the following Thursday, which is the 14th, we're in, which is the 17th, we're in Strabane. So if any of your listeners on the FM would like to hear, to see more details about those meetings, just visit our website, which is intothewest.org, and you'll see details of all the meetings on there. And what's great about the meetings next week, Darren, the first 3, which is in Derry, Letterkenny and Omagh, we have a guest speaker come over from Scotland from a really successful campaign called the Campaign for Borders Rail. And they're like a poster child for rail reopenings because they managed to get 35 miles of previously closed railway line. It was a railway line but shut in the 1960s through the rural border region of Scotland, which at the time was the only part of Britain that didn't have rail in it. They got this railway line reopened, and the biggest town on their reopened railway line is Galashiels, which is a population of 10,000, so smaller than Strabane, half the population of Letterkenny. And these guys are really important because a lot of the time people think, oh, we can't get rail back to Tyrone or Donegal. It's not going to happen. And what these guys will say is, look, we did it in Scotland. We made it happen. We got the politicians in line. They agreed, and it happened, and the railway lines opened, and now they're actually looking to extend it even further. So if they can do that in rural parts of the border region of Scotland, no reason why we can't do it in rural and urban parts of the border regions of Ireland. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They'll be at the meetings in Derry, Omagh and Letterkenny. And then the following week, as I said, we've got a meeting in Dungannon on the Monday and Strabane on the Thursday.
And you're able to, even if you're not living in the northwest of Ireland, you can join into the west. You can become a member, can't you, on your website?
Yeah, I mean, we get support from all over, from people all over the island and overseas. And it's really important because we describe ourselves as a ragtag group of volunteers. You know, nobody gets paid to do any of this. We're spending probably about £2,000, that's sterling, on this campaign. We're getting really good quality videos made, animations. We're getting good quality materials printed. And, you know, all of campaigning costs money. And one of the most practical ways people can support us and help us, especially if they're not in the region, is by becoming a member. And it's only £10 for somebody to join us. And then that means they can get invited to our AGMs. We'll keep in touch regularly with them in newsletters. And it's about basically showing that they want rail brought back. And a lot of your listeners will be thinking, well, you know, they may not live in the northwest, but you know, everybody in Dublin, everybody in the south of Ireland wants to go to Donegal on a holiday, every now and again. And my God, wouldn't it be brilliant if you could just get on a train in Dublin, and within 3 hours you would be getting off in Donegal at Letterkenny. You could even get off earlier. The Strabane stop, for example, we're proposing would be joint with Strabane and Lifford. So in less than 3 hours, you could set foot in Donegal, having got on a train in Dublin, and it'd be a fantastic way to travel and would really open up the northwest of the island and connect it into Dublin. So we'd ask that anybody of your listeners who likes what they hear, wants to support this type of thing, the most practical thing you can do is give us your support. Join us for £10. And we also have a petition basically calling for the reopening of the Northwest Rail Corridor, and you'll find that on our website as well, which is intothewest.org. So please do have a look and give us your support.
I'm delighted that you're going to have social media campaign, like videos, like having them on YouTube in particular. I think would be brilliant. Okay, Steve, to come towards the end of our interview, we've already touched on this, but can you tell me if using Into the West would welcome another assembly election being cast soon in Northern Ireland from a campaigning point of view, or is it just a waste of time, do you think, or what do you think?
I mean, we're obviously a non-partisan, non-political organisation. Sort of from Into the West's point of view, if there's an election, we'll try and influence it and ask people to vote for rail. It would be tricky because the timescales would be pretty short, and ideally we'd prefer to plan ahead of an election and really run a proper influencing campaign on the candidates and on the voters. So a very short-term time scale makes that tricky to do it properly. So I guess from an organisational point of view, with so much going on, we'd probably prefer if there wasn't an election. But, if there is one, there is one, and we will certainly do what we can to encourage people to vote for rail and to back candidates who, are serious about things like the Northwest Rail Corridor reopening.